in the next section, remember we looked at our requirements, which were how do we ensure that pages look as we want them to look on different browsers and resolutions. And in order to make that possible, we use visual testing. And so that's what we're going to do now. We're going to use visual testing to massively increase browser coverage, drastically decrease the code that we need to maintain, and drastically increase test suite stability. Visual testing. So in this section, we are going to learn what is visual testing and how to implement a visual test. Out of curiosity, in the Zoom chat, who here has done visual testing? Drop a yay or nay in the chat. I'm just curious. Okay, getting a few no's, getting a bunch of no's, which is totally typical. That's what I find in like all of these workshops and interactions that I have. Not a small portion of the community has worked with visual testing. And I find that exciting because it means that I can show you all a powerful way to test our applications. And as I said, get all of those amazing benefits. So let's proceed here. The mostly no's looks like in terms of that. So I'm glad most people, from what I could tell, at least from the chat, most people have not done visual testing. So let me just double check here, chat. Yeah, most people have not done it. So let's quickly go over about what it is and how it works. So visual end-to-end testing. Visual end-to-end testing is based around the idea that human eyes can miss critical information, right? We go into a testing process searching for one thing while potentially not seeing other things. The other type of situation is where we don't test stuff at all, right? Whether we don't have time to test it, or maybe we don't even think to test it. And so I've got some examples of visual errors happening in real life, and I think that will give you a great idea of the type of errors that can occur. So this is a pretty cool story. You can read it. I'll just quickly summarize that in Moscow in 1983, this guy Petrov, he had like a UI that displayed information about incoming missile attacks. And he started getting information from the system that there was an incoming missile attack from United States. And so he had the choice to make to launch nukes back at us or to not, right? And so despite the system telling him to do it, thank God, he decided not to launch nukes back at us. He realized that it was an error, and so a nuclear holocaust was averted. So that's kind of one bug, a very extreme bug, but something that can be caught and prevented with a visual test. Here is another less extreme example, but very costly. On the Southwest Airlines website, we can see here how this continue button is covered up by this text. The reason it's covered up by this text is a rendering problem. And so this application didn't get rendered well, and it covered up this continue button, and Southwest makes $2.5 million per hour from their website. So you can imagine that even if this was up for a very short period of time, it cost Southwest a lot of money for users to not be able to buy their flights. An even less extreme example but still relevant, is my own website. When I was creating it, I was creating it on a nice 1080p resolution monitor. And so to me, everything looked great until my website was rendered on a smaller resolution, right? Not everybody has a 1080p monitor. Maybe you're looking at my website on your laptop, on your 13-inch laptop, on your 15-inch laptop, and the resolution is going to be the viewport size is going to be much smaller. And so in that case, you can see how stuff started overlapping. Right here, it wasn't very clear where we are, and it just, the search icon moved down. There were more errors below it. And unfortunately, my website doesn't make $2.5 million an hour, but it just doesn't look professional. And especially this being a quality assurance blog, probably the confidence in my skills was drastically degraded, right? So preventing such bugs is what we use visual end-to-end testing for. Visual end-to-end testing is really kind of just a combination of functional and manual testing. It's basically ensuring that our application looks as it's supposed to look, as we want it to look, as per the requirements on whatever browser operating system resolution that we want, right? It could be a very important website that gets a lot of traffic all the time on many popular browsers and resolutions. And so then we maybe need to ensure that it looks good on all of those, or it may be just like one page. It may be just a home page that gets thousands of users every single day looking at it, and we want to ensure that that home page looks good in our application. So let me actually show you all code and how to make this possible, and then everyone will get a better picture. So that was that. We already talked about test coverage. And so the very first thing that we're going to do is tackle these three requirements, making sure that these three pages look as expected on most popular resolution. And by the way, the most popular resolution you can get by doing like a Google search. I just did a Google search of browser resolution popularity. Of course, if it's your application, maybe you don't care about the most popular screen resolution. Maybe most of your users are coming in on a mobile device. And so now you need to target a mobile device resolution. So that depends. We can see here, this looks like this 1080p resolution is the most popular. Okay. So that is the most popular resolution for this. So now is your challenge to go do this exercise, go to visualtest.java and follow instructions there to implement the visual test. Just to show everybody, you're going to visualtest.java and then you're following the instructions to implement the tests. And as always, I'm going to put a poll up to ensure that let me know if you finished or haven't finished yet. So just one thing to point to you. Oh, I didn't put a 1080p resolution here. I should have. That would be the most popular one. So maybe that's one thing. It keeps updating over time, right? Maybe when I got this, this was the most popular resolution, or maybe I even mistyped and put in the wrong one here. Regardless, you can put in the most popular one if you want, or just pretend that this is the most popular. And then just follow instructions. A bunch of the code here is really set up for you because the setup is not so important. And I can go over it in a moment to describe what it does. But actually, let me go over it now to explain exactly what's happening here. Sorry about that. So just setting up a few variables up here in our visual test. Okay, so here, unfortunately, sauce bindings doesn't currently support visual end-to-end testing. And so you have to do the old way of instantiating a remote session, which is using mutable capabilities. You can see here we're setting up browser options, right? We're passing in a browser name, browser version platform. Here we're setting up the Sauce Labs capabilities. You don't need to change any of the code here. It'll work automatically. And then finally, this is the new piece. This is being able to run on Screener IO. Actually, let me see here. This being able to run on Screener IO, and this is how you set that up. The project name corresponds to basically your application name. So I'm assuming most of you work on one application, so you would probably just put that in here. The viewport size corresponds to the viewport size. And I put here fail on new states false because I use this as a demo. So I don't want my tests to fail every time they're initially ran. And I'll show you exactly what that means when we actually run it. And then we just pass that object into our browser options. And then start a new session by pointing to this URL here. You can see that, yes, it is a different hub than you typically use for Sauce Labs or Browser Stack or whatever, or any Selenium grid. You have to point it to this hub. And then you're going to perform the visual flow. And that's one other thing that I should have mentioned is that to perform a visual flow, the best thing to do, this is actually a case where it's okay to go screen to screen to screen, is to open up our application, navigate page by page, and take snapshots to ensure that our application looks correct. And let me actually show you what the end result would look like, because I know a lot of people aren't familiar with visual testing. So visual solution here. So I'm going to run it for you all here. We'll do Maven test, visual solution, as a visual solution test. I'm going to run this and you'll see what that looks like. So it's going to start executing. And also I know a lot of people don't have the API key, which will make life painful. So that's running. Let's go to Screener. That's where the results come in. Okay. So here's the Screener dashboard. Over here, this is the project name. So you can see that this is the string that we passed in. I'm calling it Sauce Demo Java. And this is what is being executed in here. So anytime you're capturing snapshots, they will go into this location. Okay. If we click here, you can see that there's currently a build running. And so far, the results that have come in is that there are 5 snapshots that I have previously accepted as baseline, and there is one that changed. And let me do one thing just to show you guys one thing that's better. I'm just going to change this to something new. I'm going to call this Sauce Demo Java. Let's call it 2, for example. And let me rerun this actually. I just want to show you guys a new state of the snapshots. So every snapshot starts in a new state because once a snapshot is captured, what the application wants to know is this acceptable to us? That's the one manual portion of visual testing that always has to happen because no algorithm can know if the application is in a valid state or not. And so here you can see Sauce Demo Java 2 project running. Give it a second to finish. And once it finishes, we'll handle it. Let's see here. So it's running one. Okay, beautiful. So now you see new states coming in. What does that mean? It means that we've navigated each of the pages and have captured a snapshot, and our visual testing tool doesn't know what to do with these snapshots. Here's what those snapshots look like. Here's our login page. on 1080p. So this part is our test method that we passed in when we take a snapshot. Okay, that take snapshot is just a JavaScript executor command. You can see it executes that, and it's simply passing in my page object name, right, which is coming in from whatever page object I have. And then the init part, that's how we get the 1080p, because I know this is a 1080p resolution. That's how those two are coming in. But look at the snapshot. So it's now for us to decide, is this acceptable to us? Does everything here look correct? Yes, it does. I don't see any bugs here, so it looks good. I'm going to accept it as a baseline. What this means is that now every future iteration of that exact test case will check against this baseline, and if there are any visual differences, it will point those out and let us decide, what do we want to do? Do we want to report this as a bug, or do we want to update our baseline because our requirements have changed? Here's another example. So there's our login page. Here's our products page. Check it out. How does this look to everybody? It looks great to me. I don't see any visual errors, and it looks good. I'm going to accept it. Next, shopping cart page. Shopping cart page also looks great. Nothing wrong here. I'm also going to accept it. So now all of those are baselines, and any future iterations will show us the differences. What happens if there are actually differences? Unfortunately, I don't have any more in there. Let me see where I have some differences. Some good differences. Let's see. This one is good. So here's what happens if there's differences. By the way, check out how fast these visual snapshots executed. Under 2 minutes, 254 snapshots captured, 8 times parallelism. That's not only the power of parallelism, but also power of visual snapshots is they're super fast and super stable. So let's look at what has changed. Here's what changes look like. It says that here our account on this resolution has changed. Let's see what's happened here. So we can see here that before this button was here, now it's here. In fact, if we expand this, Screener tells us exactly what has happened. So we had one layout change where there was a shift of the element, and we also had a style change. So we can actually ignore these changes if, for example, let's say you have a header that has like a sale or a countdown timer or a date that you want to ignore. You can ignore this either through the UI and say, I don't care about this change, and in the future, don't notify me about these changes. Or you can do it through code as well by specifying a locator that you want to ignore, and then when the test runs, it's not gonna show you a change in that locator. So if this is acceptable, we would accept this change, and this will be a new baseline. If it's not acceptable, we go back to the developer and say, hey, there's a bug. For some reason, the button has shifted. Let's fix it. Let's look at another example. Here's another example of an API key button. Here's another example. You can see how this button simply changed colors, and this text has changed, right? So it went from 1x parallelism to 2x parallelism. So this would be a wonderful thing to actually ignore for us, because we don't care that the text in there is changing, right? So we could click here and ignore it. And now our application is not going to complain about this anymore. We can also undo ignore. And also it's saying that there's been a style change, that the background color has changed of this link element. There's also a history of everything that's happened to this component over time. You can see here's the component being captured at different states. And everything that's happened to it. At this point, it was accepted by me. and then afterwards it's just been running. And then one final change here. This one is cool to see because here we used to have this header, and now we no longer have this header. So what's interesting here, right? Imagine our entire application has shifted up because there's no longer this header. However, only this header was identified as being deleted. You can see this div was deleted. And that's one of the very cool things about Screener is it uses a visual hybrid diff to let us know that a change has occurred, but it doesn't highlight the entire application and say the entire application has changed, because it knows that the only thing that's changed was this element, even though everything has shifted up. So it's kind of smart like that. What I found with visual tests, whether it's with Screener or really any other technology, I've used multiple technologies in the past, visual testing is extremely stable and very rarely gives you false positives in terms of like failures. I found that visual testing can give you false positives if your application has like dynamic rendering components. Maybe you have a spinner, or maybe your application lazy loads certain portions. If you don't handle those correctly, like you don't wait for the spinner to disappear before capturing the snapshot, or you don't lazy load your page first before capturing the snapshot, that's where you'll get errors and you'll get weird snapshots because not everything is loaded and it won't be in the right state. So just make sure that your application is in a rendered state before capturing the snapshot. I'll even show you like an example of lazy loading. Like if you go to my website, so you'll see here, if as I scroll, you'll see stuff loading in like here. See how it like loads in? If I didn't capture this, if I didn't make this load first, it would capture this as like blanks or like partial loading. And so just keep that in mind. Let me see. I think I've explained visual testing to you all pretty well. Looks like more than 50% of the people have been successful. I see a number of questions. Ask me any questions you may or may not have.
Yeah, Nikolai, there's one from Chandra in the Q&A. Basically around stuff like A/B testing. Can you have multiple baselines for visual? And would you be able to approve either of them? Like what would be the best practice for using visual in that way?
Hey, yeah, thanks, Chris. You don't want multiple baselines of a snapshot. Oh, hold on. Let me know. So you don't want multiple baselines of a snapshot, because if you think of your page, it only has a single state that is correct. It can't have two states that are correct. I understand your point about A/B testing, but one of them is A and the other is B, and each one of those is its own baseline. So no, you can't have multiple baselines, and you also don't want to have multiple baselines. You just want to create a new baseline for each iteration of that page. So again, A, you would have snapshot of A, you would have a snapshot of B, make sure they look as they're supposed to look, and that's it. They'll have their own validations. Does that make sense, Chandra? Let me see. What is API virtualization based on different user types? Sometimes website can hide show content. How does visual testing based on different user types can hide show content? Chandra, it's important to figure out what you want your visual state of the application to look like at any point. If there are multiple users that are creating multiple states of your application, and each one of those states is very relevant to the business, well, that's one thing I want to preface here. I wouldn't do visual testing for all of the pages, right? Like, I mean, for example, the contact us page, right, of a application. Let's say you have an application that gets 1 million users a month, and then your contact us page is receiving 5 users per month. I would ask, do you really need to spend time to test that contact us page, which is such a small percentage versus the home page? Because then you can use that time to focus your efforts elsewhere. So it's important to determine first what is business critical and what is important to test. Once we've determined that, if there are numerous users creating numerous states of the application, and we deem each one of those important, then we need to capture each one of those is its own baseline. So you're going to have, as you said, an institutional user, you're going to have a retail user. You need to be going in as each one of those users and capturing a snapshot of that page in that state as its own. And then you're going to be comparing those over time, right? Because let's say something broke in the institutional user logic. For whatever reason, when the institutional user logs in, whatever you wanted to see there is not there. And so now that visual test will fail. You'll report it as a bug, but the retail user will continue to pass because that logic is working. Let me know if something doesn't make sense. And you will actually get a really good view of this as we kind of move through more visual testing. You can capture as many snapshots as you want of the tool. So it's all about structuring here, structuring your test. So for example, okay, the way a snapshot is considered unique, which this is a really great conversation. The way a snapshot is considered unique is by a combination of 5 parameters: the browser name, browser version, and the platform, the viewport size, and the test name, which is right there. So those 5 parameters, if you change any one of those, oh, and also branch, but don't worry about branches. It's don't even look or think about branching. It's a super confusing thing that I think causes more harm than good. But those 5 parameters, if you change any one of them, that's a brand new snapshot. So as you saw me in my demo, I changed project name and that went into totally new snapshots. But if, and by the way, here, let's do that. I'll show you. We'll go into here. Oh, sorry, just answering questions here. If I go into here, where in our sauce demo Java 2, we have 3 accepted, right? I've accepted 3 of these baselines. If I change this from 1080p to call it, 12p, okay? And we're going to run this again. It's going to create entirely brand new snapshots. So it's how you structure it. So if you have users creating multiple states, the way I would structure this is you obviously are going to have your login page where you're logging in. And I don't know if that triggers a brand new state for a user. If that's the case, I would just log in with each user and then capture the appropriate snapshot. And in fact, in that case, I might even have separate visual flows for each user. Here I put all my pages into a single flow just because it's super easy. But if now there's different users creating different states, I might have a separate test for that. And then with one user, log in with an institutional user and another one with a retail user. And then those will create separate snapshots because you'll be setting a totally separate init. You'll say institutional user or login user. The other thing that you can do is data drive that test, all the same pages, different logins. And you're actually going to see that in a little bit, how we do that for Safari and Chrome. And so then you can just change the data-driven parameters. But let me see what I was showing here. So see how that generated totally brand new snapshots, even though everything is exactly the same. The only thing that I changed was this guy. So it's again how you structure the test code to reflect what you want to see. And there's no right or wrong answer there. It's what do you want to see in the dashboard? Let me see if I have a better, more complicated example of a dashboard. Source demo Java. No, I don't know. I actually, yeah, the example I showed was great. Let me see here. Just to show you what an example of what something can look like. Where was screener component? So check this out. 254 changes, right? So if I view the accepted ones, this is what the organization looks like, right? So they're organized by everything is on 1024 Chrome, and this is account, here's activity. So they're kind of like grouped based on functionality. But for you, it might be grouped by user. You might have all the same pages, but for an institutional user. Here you might have a, what you call it, the retail user. And then you'll have all the same pages, but captured for a retail user. That's one way to see it. Yeah, these tools taking more and more efforts. Yeah, absolutely. This visual testing is like one of the most powerful techniques of testing that most people are still not using. And that's why I'm like super excited to be here and sharing this with you all, because it's insanely powerful. But let me stop talking about it and we can see it actually in action. Cool, we got through the questions. Cool, so with all of that said, how do we do the same exact thing in Safari? Here's another exercise for you. Go to this guy here, follow the instructions, and then you're gonna run this command and everything should work for you. Unless you don't have a screener API key. Yeah. So give that a shot, and then we'll talk about it in a moment. And I am actually going to just run this command and show you the output without showing you the exercise. So you are navigating to this data-driven tests and making this work. And I'm going to go navigate to the solution. I don't even need to navigate to the solution. I'm just going to run it. It's visual data driven. Visual data driven. Visual. Oh no, I do want a solution. So here we go. I'm just going to run this for you all to show you the output. But you go ahead and keep working on the exercise. Should be relatively quick. I'm going to throw up here another poll of whether you were able to finish it or not. Oh, unfortunately, I don't have a second poll for data-driven testing. I forgot about that. Let me see if I can like delete the results. I can't. Oh, well, just feel free to drop in the chat when you are finished. So let's go take a look at screener. Here's our source demo Java project. Logs of what's running. Give it a little time. Oh, one other thing I should have shown you all while that runs. is what that actually looks like when the tests are being executed. I mean, I'm sure you all can figure it out from the code, but it's always nice to see it live too, right? Oh, sorry. So here's an error. Let's do this one. Let's see if this is so here's a good one. So this is our visual flow, right? We see the command, and this is all it does. It is going to hit page by page and capture snapshots in the appropriate resolution, right? So it's gone to that page. Obviously, it needs to log in. You know what I realized? What would have been even better was if we logged in with our cookies. There, we're using that functionality. Here, it's adding an item to a cart, capturing a snapshot. So just some kind of visual testing strategy for you all. As I mentioned, the best thing to do is to just go page by page with one test and capture all the pages that you want to check for visual quality in a single test, assuming that what's important to you are different browsers and resolutions, which for most of us with web applications being responsive, a lot of times that's the priority. But there are other ways to structure it. I've had customers that also have a locale difference, right? Maybe their application not only has a bunch of pages that are important in different resolutions, but now they are also important in English, Spanish, French, right? Because they're targeting multiple countries. So that's another dimension to add to this. You can have all the pages on multiple browsers and operating resolutions on multiple locales. So it's like tons of snapshots. Let's go back here. Cool. So here is our project. We see now that we have 5 accepted and 1 changed. So 6 snapshots, right? What does that map to? It maps to our requirements, our visual requirements. We have 3 pages for Chrome, 3 pages for Safari. I made this just simple, just for us to follow, but you can imagine we might want to capture snapshots of all of our pages for this application. And what's changed? Let's take a look. I actually left this in there to show you all what a previous iteration of this cart page looked like. So you can see here's our cart page. This is on Safari, right? You can see that up here. This is what it previously looked like. And look what it looks like now, because we've added an item to the cart in our flow. It has this and this that was added. So that's the question, is do we want to set this as a baseline and this looks good, or do we want to keep the original baseline? You know what might be another potential question is keeping this as its own baseline, an empty state shopping cart page, and then maybe you want the shopping cart page with a element in a cart, right? And so those are 2 different baselines that you might want to capture to make sure that everything looks good. And then the other thing that visual testing is so powerful here, what we had to do in the past, right? If you wanted to ensure that a user can add an item to a cart correctly, you might need to add an item to a cart and then check this counter, right? We actually did that ourselves in our functional test. But now we can add an item to a cart and then just capture the snapshot. And not only do we make sure that there's the correct counter in our cart, we capture the entire page and see everything that is potentially wrong with it, like this item being there or not being there, you know? And so with one single snapshot command, we can do like hundreds or thousands of validations at the same time. And I'm not gonna do anything with this change just because I want it to be in a change state for the future. Oh, here's a history too, if you want to see what the history looked like. So you can see the entire history. At some point, it was accepted by me somewhere or not. I might have automatically accepted it through code. You can also reject. If you reject, it will not set it as a baseline. So Chandra makes a comment about the BDD tests, having a lot of noise code maintenance, but sometimes going back to the basics and keeping the framework simple with easy tools might be a way forward. Yeah, totally agree with you, Chandra. That is the same thing that I find working with customers all over the world is it's literally exactly as you said, BDD is a lot of noise with little added value. I don't know if anyone else agrees, disagrees, had different experiences. I'm always happy to hear it. Oh, and curious, who here, has anyone here been able to do the exercise, visual data-driven test exercise? It should have been relatively easy. I kind of set you up for most of it. It was really just changing a few things, a few strings to fields. Let's go look in the chat. How are we doing on time? We're doing pretty good on time. I'm actually just going to go get through this. I want to leave time for the last two sections. So here's what the data-driven solution looks like. This is the power of JUnit 4 with Maven. We are able to do data-driven testing with that combination. So adding this annotation at the top makes this a data-driven test. These parameters, before they were fields, now we're just adding these annotations at the top and giving each one of them an index. Okay, so index 0, index 1, 2, and so on. How does this relate? Is we have this object here of data. This is how we're going to be able to data drive our test code. Each one of these rows means a brand new test method, and each of these index corresponds to index in our parameter, right? So for example, this Chrome string corresponds to our zeroth key, which is browser name. Windows 10 here corresponds to our second key, which is platform. And so that's how we can access these values through here. You can have tons of rows. I only put 2 here because we only have 2 requirements to meet, but you can easily imagine how we can multiply this to run on many resolutions. We can make it mobile by, instead of having desktop resolutions, we can have mobile resolutions as well, right? iPhone and Android phones, those are super critical for a web application as well. And so this, of course, I hard-coded it here in the test class because I feel it's appropriate and relevant to what we are trying to do. If for whatever reason, your data for here needs to be dynamically updated, maybe through an external file, you can, of course, read it from an XML, a CSV, whatever you need as well. But again, hard coding here is appropriate. This is set up like normal, but now instead, we're simply reading from our fields, right? And our fields will access the data in here. So again, each one of these rows will be a brand new test method. So what that means is that we're going to have 2 tests that are executing. One test will run on this combination. Another test will run on this combination. Here are the fields that are setting that. Here's the viewport size being set dynamically. And finally, our init, we are calling resolution name. And so if we run this, it'll run 2 tests. I'm going to run it. Actually, I don't even need to run it. I've run it for you before. So you can see it's executed 2 tests with 1 failure. The failure here was right here. If we scroll up, it says that we expected null, but had 1 visual regression found. That's because here, look at our assertion. Our assertion is checking, we're hitting this get visual results. It's just a JavaScript executor from screener that calls this command, and that returns a map of results. we use those results to read the message, and that message will tell us all of the variations. And so when we ran our test, that's exactly what we saw here together. We had 6 total snapshots, but 1 had changed. And so because that 1 had changed, our test failed. And so it tells us that, hey, there's something we need to do with this test because there was a single change. And then all the rest of the code remains exactly the same. Let me run this just so everyone can see again, because I explained it now. So it's just going to execute two tests, one test and then another test. Let's take a look here. One thing I do want you to notice, which is kind of in preparation for the next section, is how long all of this has taken. It takes quite a little bit to go through and capture all the snapshots and do it 2 times. And so we're going to speed that up a lot in the future. No need to let it finish running. Any questions on that? I know it was a new technology for many people. I know I did a lot of stuff. Not only did I introduce you to visual testing, I also even showed you cross-browser parallelization. So any questions there? By the way, when we were talking about different situations, if you don't feel as though it's important for your business to have this coverage for your web application, but instead you want to do an institutional user and a a retail user, you can do that, right? You can data drive your test to only have those 2 parameters, right? And then be passing maybe you're passing in a username and an access key. Username and a password here instead of all of this. You can do it like that. You can even add more parameters here so that you capture every combination that you want in every single test, and each one of those will come through as its own snapshot. You can do it like that. But I did just want to correlate kind of the snapshots here to everything. So you can see resolution. This is generated for us automatically. Here's the init. This is the value coming from the init. That's this guy right here. Okay. Corresponding to resolution name, and that's I'm setting it in the init. What else? This is the same thing from the init, and here's the test name that's coming in from take snapshot method, which I wrapped, which is simply that, and getting the page object name. So every one of my this is in my abstract page object, but all of my child page objects obviously will pass this in. So we obviously introduced some redundancy, right? For example, this right here, making sure that our login page looks as expected on Chrome in most popular resolution, it does exactly the same thing as this, right? It's ensuring that our application is rendering. So we can actually no longer even need this test, right? We can come to our test suite of our end-to-end tests. Here, I'm going to be in the solutions. We can come to our end-to-end test, and we can totally remove this test, because why do we need it? We're already doing this with a visual test. But not only are we ensuring that our application renders, we also ensure that it looks correct. So let's update this. Login page renders, technologies. I'm going to do technologies comments like this. Login page renders, screener, and it's no longer this kind of test. It's a visual end-to-end test. That's how we're accomplishing that. Interestingly, can we do the same thing with a valid user can log in? We definitely can, right? We can log in with a user and then capture the snapshot of the next page and ensure that a user was successfully logged in too, right? Instead of checking for an existence of an element, we can check for the entire rendering of a page. So that's one potential redundancy to think about as well, whether we just eliminate this test altogether, the functional test, and just keep the visual test. It's possible. you know, I think it's realistic to think about that. And then of course we are doing all of this now. This is a visual end-to-end. And we did this with screener, sauce, Selenium. And I'm just gonna paste this in for here, 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 and here. Cool. All right. Let's take a look. Yeah, we covered all of this with visual end-to-end, and this will leave alone. Awesome. So, just a quick summary is that hopefully with that, and let me know if you don't agree, if something I didn't connect the dots somewhere, but hopefully you saw how visual end-to-end testing is a simple and efficient way to test our web applications cross-platform. It can actually, as I said, even replace a lot of our functional tests that we used to do. I actually still have customers on a regular basis that will, I actually just had a customer, I analyzed their test code. They open up a page and check for hundreds of elements. I think it was like multiple minutes were spent checking for hundreds of elements on one page. And that can actually be overcome with a single snapshot. One line of code, after you, of course, configure the correct hub, one line of code could have done all the things that hundreds of lines of code did, and captured the entire state of the page, and whatever elements they were checking for, of course, they would be captured in that snapshot. So keep that in mind.